Okay, hello homesteaders, preppers, prepper-steaders. I'm going to go over in this episode the pros and cons of an electric chainsaw. As you can see over there, I've got an electric chainsaw. I've also got my old trusty gas still chainsaw, and I'm going to go over why the advantages of an electric chainsaw. One of the big advantages of having an electric chainsaw is if you're off-grid, you have solar power such as what we have, and it is a renewable source and you don't need to store fuel. But there are some advantages to having both, and I'm going to go over all of that right now. The power of an electric chainsaw. All electric chainsaws require some form of electric power source. You can get lower cost electric chainsaws that plug in to an outlet, which is not a bad solution for some people. For us, everything is a little further away from outlets, and I wanted the portability of having a battery. And the batteries come in all different sizes. This particular one is an 80 volt, and it's a Greenworks. And I'm not telling you to go out and buy Greenworks 80 volt at all. The big thing you need to determine with a chainsaw first is, for one, if you own any other products that are electric. We already owned a pruning chainsaw in 80 volt. Back in Wisconsin, we had an 80 volt snowblower. We have a hedge trimmer 80 volt Greenworks, all the same brand, because unfortunately, majority of the batteries are not interchangeable with other brands. So once you get into a system, you kind of want to make sure they have other products you're going to want. We even have an 80 volt leaf blower. So we do have a lot of Greenworks stuff, and when I decided to get a bigger chainsaw, I decided to go to Greenworks because I like their other products, and I purchased this one. This is their Pro model, the 80 volt, and it's pretty heavy duty chainsaw. And then you can see the batteries. I have quite a few of these batteries. Typically, these batteries last me about the same as a tank of gas. So you need to plan accordingly for that. So I have 3 of these, usually 3 tanks of gas, and I need to be refilled with some energy. So 3 batteries is plenty. I can cut wood with 1 battery. When I run out of the battery, I can swap batteries, take the 1 battery, put it back on the charger. I have 1 other battery in reserve. And then it's a good continuous cycle if you need to go longer. What's nice about these batteries too, and I'll show you this right now, and I'm going to set this down because, believe it or not, these are not any lighter than a gas chainsaw. They're actually pretty heavy. Most of these batteries do have a, there you go, if you can see it, the light's just lit up on it. It tells you the indicator. So you have 4 bars, kind of your full charge dropping down, and then usually when I get to 1 bar, I stop. I don't want to drain the battery completely, so I will stop at the 1 bar mark. I think one of my older batteries only has 3 bars, but it's kind of the same thing. When I get to that last bar, I just swap out the batteries. And then the lithium batteries, this is the 80 volt. They do come in different capacities with amp hours. So this is a 2.5. My older ones are 2.0, and I think they go up to they go up higher, but the higher the amp hours, the more expensive they are. And I'm on a budget, I'm cheap, so I get the batteries. Unfortunately, these batteries are about $100 a piece, and I have 3 of them, and that's my limit, and I bought the cheaper ones. The higher amp hour ones are a couple $100 a piece, so you got to consider that. You can get 1 of those or 2 of the cheap ones, and to me, 2 of the cheaper ones is more versatile because, like I said, I could have one on the charger while I'm using the other one, and it only takes, it charges really quick, like 15-20 minutes, and it's charged. So I can just kind of swap out that way. And you may want to consider a smaller chainsaw if you already have like 18 volt tools, like a impact gun, you know, screwdriver, drills that are 18 volt. I actually have Ryobi tools, and I have a Ryobi 18 volt chainsaw. I left it in Wisconsin right now. It's with my dad, but it uses just the standard 18 volt tools, and it's a small light duty chainsaw, and that is a perfect solution if you have like a couple branches here and there, maybe a small tree you need to remove. But if you heat with wood and you need to remove a lot of wood or do a lot of cutting, it's not the best solution. You want to go to a bigger battery or have lots of batteries for that, because that does not last very long. You get a couple cuts of a tree and then it drops the battery quite a bit, but it's still a good solution in an emergency. The other thing to realize when looking for an electric chainsaw, just like a gas chainsaw, you want to look at your bar length. And these you can actually swap out and change too, but you might as well get what you want originally. And this one, I've got an 18-inch, which I like, because when you have an 18-inch bar, it's set in a little bit, so the length of your bar that's sticking out is roughly 16 inches, so you can use it as a measuring device when you're cutting logs, because ideal log size is about 16 inches. So I like to use the 18-inch bar and then have a 16-inch roughly measuring device built into the saw. They're very similar where they still have the brake, just like a gas chainsaw. They still use bar oil, just like a gas chainsaw. They're just a lot more quiet. I don't have to wear ear protection anymore. And they're really good because if you're going to be doing start-stop jobs, such as behind me, where you're going to be removing a lot of limbs and setting down and moving, setting down, you know, cut, set down the saw, move some stuff, cut again, set down the saw, move, and things like that, much better with the electric chainsaw than using my gas saw. My gas saw, I would either let it run or shut it off and just constantly having to restart it. It's just not fun. With this, it's nice. And I like the fact that I don't have to wear ear protection. That's probably the greatest thing about electric chainsaw. It's like a suppressor for your chainsaw. Okay, I'm gonna go over the drawbacks of an electric chainsaw. As stated, one of the biggest drawbacks I would say is, once you find the system you like, is batteries. Batteries are just not cheap. They're constantly getting better and the price is coming down, but they are still expensive. Like I said, this battery is roughly about $100. And there are generic batteries, and looking at the reviews on Amazon, they're just not as good. So I stick to the factory batteries. But like I said, they are getting better, the prices are coming down. They should be around a long period of time. The other negatives, as stated, if you're going to be doing hardcore long cuts and cutting lots of big wood, I would consider using gas. Like I said, the electric is good for small, quick jobs where you're taking a lot of breaks. When I do heavy use, the battery doesn't last me as long, and not the equivalent of a full tank of gas on my gas saw. But as you can see here, on this job here, I've got a big tree, hardwood, that's down. I did all the limbing on this with the electric chainsaw. I will probably use my gas saw to cut my rounds to split, but all the small work on here, I'll use the electric saw. It's just so much easier. It's so much better for me to use. The other disadvantages, if you have a lower end model with a cord, the cord can get in the way. If you have the battery ones, like I have, they're actually, I almost feel like it's heavier than my gas saw. So that's one thing to consider too. The battery is pretty heavy, so they are a little heavier, but if you get a smaller saw, you know, I could have gotten away with the smaller saw, and I kind of wish I would have, just for what I'm using it for, but I wanted the capability to be able to cut big stuff. I have cut big logs with this saw, and it does work. And it's no different than a gas saw where you have to make sure the chain is sharp, and you know, there's bar oil in there. But other than that, it's a good, solid choice for a lot of people. And especially if you're off-grid, it is free for me to run this saw, with the exception of the initial cost of batteries, which is no different than the initial cost in getting solar and battery backup for the house. It's prepaying your electric more or less. But for us, it's a nice solution. And it's not the best solution for everybody. So as far as drawbacks go, for me personally, the only big ones are the cost of batteries, the weight, and the initial cost of the equipment, because the chainsaws are still not that cheap. They're not badly priced though, but it was cheaper than my Stihl gas saw, but with the battery it ends up being about the same. You throw that extra $100 on there. And the limited use of them is another, I would say, a con, but if you have more than one battery and you're constantly charging, it's not the biggest con. So maybe initially when you don't have a lot of batteries stocked up, you don't have 2 batteries or 3 batteries, it could be a very big con where you can only cut the about equivalent of a gas tank. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm going to go over choosing the right electric chainsaw for your homestead. This is a tough one because I don't know what brand electrical equipment you may currently have. Like I said, you might have some 18-volt Milwaukee tools, you might have some Ryobi tools, you might have some Harbor Freight tools. So you might want to first start with the current battery selection you have, and if you only have 18-volt tools, you may want to try one of the lower end 18-volt chainsaws just to kind of get your feet wet and see if it works for you and see how good it works. It really depends on what you're going to use the saw for. So you need to do some homework, determine realistically what are your uses for this. I would recommend chainsaws that are electric like this for emergency use, small yard use, off-grid use if you have multiple batteries, and a bigger saw such as mine where it's 18 volt and you're going to heat with wood. Believe it or not, I actually got rid of my gas log splitter and I have an electric log splitter now, just for the fact that we are off-grid, battery backup, and trying to live as sustainably as possible. That'll be another episode though, because that's I don't know how it's going to work yet. So that one's still on the experimentational phase. I'm slowly going there. I was very much against electric chainsaws initially, and then I kind of worked my way up into them, and now I see the value in them. And they are a great alternative, especially if you're in, for me out here, I don't really care about the saw noise. I mean, I gotta wear earplugs, but maybe you live in a neighborhood and you don't want to bother your neighbors, different things like, I mean, the sound, it is nice that it is not as loud. They still make some noise, but they're not as loud as a regular gas chainsaw. And then you don't have to mix the oil and the gas. You don't have to, I always went and got ethanol-free gas. If you have a chainsaw and you're having problems with it all the time and you use ethanol gas, stop using ethanol gas and get ethanol-free gas. You'll never have another problem with your chainsaw. Also, when choosing your electric chainsaw, like I stated before, you might want to consider the bar size. Are you going to be doing just limbing and things like that so you can get a small bar? Are you going to need it like a pole saw, which I actually have an electric chainsaw that's a pole saw. And it's got a very small blade on it, and I love that saw. And that was the main reason for getting this other saw. That pole saw, I ended up using so much and loving it so much that I was actually using it as a regular chainsaw on the ground with that extension on it just because I had it, and it was so wonderful to use, but I hated that extension. It's almost like 10 feet, and it was just very awkward. And unfortunately, they make no way to shorten it. At least Greenworks doesn't. That'd be a great idea if they did. They made one where you can take the pole section out and make a short saw out of it. That would be ideal. That would have been my perfect saw. So that's one thing to consider, is the size of them, the weight of them. If you can, go to a big box store, physically feel them, and kind of find out if it's going to be too heavy for you. But power-wise, like I said, for small jobs, unless you're strictly heating your house 100% with wood and you're going to be out there for hours, more than likely an electric chainsaw will work good for you, because you'd be surprised. And like I said, if you have a couple batteries, you can do a lot of big jobs with them. So, is an electric chainsaw right for your homestead? That's for you to decide, unfortunately. I can't make that choice for you. For our homestead, it is the right decision. It complements my gas saw, and I'll be honest, since we have been out here 6 months, I have cut a lot of wood, Let me look behind me. I used an electric chainsaw. I've used the electric chainsaw quite a bit, limbing, cutting down trees. It's just much easier. As stated, I don't have to take my ear protection. And my stills, they run great. They still take 3 to 5 pulls to start every time. Whenever I do videos in the past and I did the 1 pull start, it had been warmed up and running earlier. I could never get it to start. It's not designed to actually start on 1 pull. When they're warmed up and they've been running good, they will start up on 1 pull. But that initial time when I get it out of the shop, you have to do the 3 pulls, flip the lever, pull it again, flip the lever, and then go. So that's one thing to consider. The electric ones, you put the battery in, hit the power button, and they go. I will say one more negative, and it's not really a negative, But on the electric models, they have a power button. And when you turn it on and say you set it down and you're moving some limbs and you come back and grab the saw, more than likely it has a timer on it, and I forget what it is, it might be a minute or two. You gotta hit the power button again. It automatically shuts off to conserve battery, which is a pro or a con, depending on how you look at it. But hopefully this was helpful. It's kind of a weird topic because we're at that transitionary period where a lot of people are thinking everything should go electric, and that is not the case. I still am a big negative on electric cars. I love hybrids. I think hybrid is a great solution, and unfortunately they don't make a hybrid chainsaw, but that would be interesting. They don't make them yet, but ultimately for chainsaws, I still think on a homestead is to have both. You have your gas and your electric, and especially if you're solar off grid, you could use your electric majority of the time, but in emergencies, say a tornado hits, a hurricane hits, I have my 3 batteries, and say my solar array gets knocked out, I have my 3 batteries. That's it. I have lots of cans of still gas in the can. In the can, the gas can last over 5 years. It's like 5 to 7 years in storage. So keep that in mind too. If you're a prepper, you're in storm country, and you need to make sure you have a reliable method of cleaning up the property or getting out of your shelter, you want to have probably the electric saws and some batteries, and then also your gas chainsaws and some still or equivalent pre-mixed gas in containers for long-term storage, because it will last. Unfortunately, most gas you get from the gas stations, even the ethanol-free, will not last as long. They put some additives and different things in there, but the still fuel will last. So that's one takeaway there. And other than that, like I said, it's a personal preference, but I believe an electric chainsaw will complement almost every homestead. It'll be one of those things that you're like, why didn't I get this sooner? Like I said, it's just, even the sound alone, it lets you enjoy nature a little bit more. And like I said, it's been great for us here. It's one of the, I'm very tight in my budget from retiring early, and it is one of the purchases that I feel good about, and I've used it quite a bit. So hopefully that was helpful. And like I said, any questions on it, ask. Like I said, I've been using electric chainsaws for quite a while. This new Greenworks, not quite as long, but their older pole saw, I've been using it for a few years now, maybe 4 years, 5 years, and I've got some experience with it. So any questions, drop a line. I'm kind of curious to hear everybody's thoughts on gas or electric. So thanks again, and until next time. Thanks. Big camera. I'm still waiting for the temperature in my water to be perfect. It's still warming up. I'm gonna end it there. Thanks. Like and subscribe. I gotta support this shirt because it was a gift. I love it. I do. So thanks again. Bye.